So this week, I'm joined by not just one, but two audit partners at EY Southampton. This is the first time we've done it with two interviewees with the podcast, to the point where actually we've only got the two mics. So we've had to set up slightly different on the mics this week. So, but hopefully that means that sort of double the insight and double the talking points where there's two of you. So Ryan has worked his way through EY Southampton. How long have you been managing partner here now, Ryan?
So I joined as a graduate in 2004. I've been a partner for 5 years, but managing partner since July last year. So
Fantastic.
9 months, I guess, which I should know as an accountant.
Yeah, yeah, good.
Yeah.
And Jhen, obviously having sort of grown up in the Philippines, moved to the UK in 2019, promoted to partner sort of at the start of this year. So great sort of trajectory for yourself, and also being the people lead at EY Southampton here for 3 years now,
Yeah,
give or
3
take.
years.
Yeah, brilliant. So on today's episode, we're going to be talking about diversification and equal opportunities at EY, as well as sort of the great but necessary, I feel, work that the business are doing to help those from various backgrounds in the local market, in the local community. So welcome to the balance sheet with me, Andrew Merkin. So firstly, Jhen, obviously you're people lead here at EY in Southampton. I guess for context and to start, why is diversity at EY important to you personally?
Yeah, I think, Andrew, as you can tell, and as you mentioned as part of your introduction, I came from a diverse background. And moving through the ranks in EY and understanding how important is diversity, I can actually emulate it as I lead the people that we have, not only here in Southampton, but also nationally. So that kind of diversity needs to foster that kind of belongingness, not only within the organization, but as a whole. It's not only, diversity and inclusiveness that is being promoted outside, but it's also something that we perform internally here as an organization. It's like walk the talk.
Sure.
So as a people lead, it's really important that for whatever concerns that we have here in the office, I have a team that I can tap for support or can raise it internally within EY.
Brilliant. So obviously we met and spoke on Teams sort of before doing this. We do our research here. It's not just off the cuff. Spoke about sort of the insights and unique challenges for career development for the people from diverse backgrounds sort of face. Tell us a little bit more about potentially your experience with that and your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think in terms of unique challenges, a lot of people can relate if English is not your first language. Superficial, on the first few months that I arrived here, when there's a meeting, it's actually a challenge for me to follow, because in a meeting, there's a lot of jargons, there's a lot of local terms that is being used that I cannot really translate in English straightforward. But then that's the first few months. But more than that, it's actually the challenge about, as part of my career, finding a mentor and finding a role model that is relatable to me.
Yeah.
I think it's mainly as a result of internal bias. If someone doesn't talk like me, doesn't look like me, doesn't came from the same background, I felt like that's in me, that saying, maybe if I open up, they will not understand. So that's in me. I mean, the leadership team within Southampton and also nationally has been very supportive. But then that is a unique challenge that I try to actually persevere to overcome.
Yeah.
But then in reality, that challenge actually created a big opportunity for me to be the role model that I'm searching for. And being the role model, eventually I'll be that person who can potentially be relatable and can guide, junior team members that is aspiring to navigate to their career journey.
Fantastic. And do you get, in your role over the last 3 years of doing this, have you had individuals come to you and you've sort of recognised challenges that they have with challenges you've had, and actually you've had points where you've been able to say, yeah, I know I can recommend dealing with this way because I face that challenge as well.
Yeah. And sometimes it's not only as my role as a people lead, but also as a leader in the business.
Yeah.
Sometimes when an individual approach you, they just wanted to be heard. They just wanted to be understood. It doesn't mean that a resolution needs to be made. And that kind of, just be heard, understood, and know that I can empathize is really, really important. So for the 3 years that I'm in my people lead, I have a lot of, discussions like that.
Yeah, you used the word empathy there. That's a word that comes out quite a lot in these conversations, not just with relation to diversity, but just in leadership in general. I think sort of being that approachable person, having that empathy is really important. So
Definitely.
no, that makes sense. But I guess obviously Jen's very passionate about this, but it would fall apart if the whole business wasn't sort of behind it. So I guess how do you, as yourself and as a group of other partners and the business generally, how do you sort of support Jhen and the wider business with this sort of goal and focus? And how does that feed into business sort of strategy, I guess?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, from a kind of from an overall perspective, I think it's important that all businesses kind of reflect society, right? And we live in a hugely diverse society, and we want that reflected in our business. It gives us sort of diversity of thought, diversity of challenge. We don't want everyone thinking in the same way, because that's probably not going to offer the best outcomes for us as a business and for our clients. So we are constantly looking to kind of challenge ourselves. And I think, Jen, we have something like over 20 different nationalities within the office, and that's in an office of about 200 people. So if you multiply that up across 20,000 people in the UK, 400,000 people globally, it sort of is a good representation of how diverse we are. And that's not just diversity of gender or ethnicity. That relates to lots of things. If I think about my own story, in my school of over about 100 people in my year, I think there were 5 of us that went on to sixth form college or some form of other education after that. And I was lucky enough to go on to college and then to university and do well, but I had certainly never heard of the Big Four or a company like EY until I got to my last year of university. And I recognised that I was quite privileged to go to university after where I started. So not everyone gets that opportunity. So I think it's really important for us to give people that opportunity because it's the right thing to do, but it also just creates the biggest talent pool, right, for our business, for other businesses to have a great group of people that can go on and do good things. So I think all the stuff that Jen's talked about from a sort of recruitment perspective is really important. I think role modelling is really important, because as much as we say we're going to be diverse, people look to people above them. You should say, has that glass ceiling been broken? Can I get there?
Walk the walk, rather.
Exactly. And Jen's very modest about this, right? But we had a what we call flash news, where we give an office update to our sort of 200 people every month or so. And at the one in January, when we announced Jen's promotion, I'd never seen so many comments, likes, smiley faces, whatever it is, to sort of celebrate Jhen, because people are so proud of her, and also proud that they could see that future for themselves. Maybe I'm just comparing it to the amount of likes of all the boring stuff that I'm talking about that I get when I'm sort of doing that. But that was really important. And I think it's also important that we hold ourselves to account and listen to what everyone's saying, and Jhen sort of kicked this process off, but we do a lot of upward feedback. A lot of the feedback that we get about how they want to be treated, how they want to be led, is always revealing for me, and I learn loads from that, because they often can teach us a lot of things that necessarily aren't our lived experience, and how we can sort of apply that to everyone, I hope creates a good culture for everyone to want to be in.
One piece of constructive feedback in terms of diversity: there are far too many under 25s in the EY five-a-side football team. I think you need to get some more over 35s in there to make it a bit of a more of an even battle. I think.
Yeah, well, they have James, one of my fellow partners, and myself have kind of promised to join or play five-a-side with the team. So I'm sure we'll bring both the age up and the level of talent down at the same time. So we'll try to do that for you in the future.
Very good. And we were talking before, obviously, that you mentioned, Ryan, when you're when you came into the role as managing partner, obviously diversity and equal opportunities is important, but there's sort of other work that you do locally that's a really important part of sort of your employer brand, rather than as well as and in conjunction with the sort of diversity piece.
Yeah, I mean when I became office managing partner back in July, we had a sort of an off-site strategy session for all of our managers and above to actually think about, why are we here? Right, we get that we come to work each week, we do some accounting stuff, we fill in our timesheets, and we have a good culture within the office. But actually, what's our reason for being? What's our purpose? And actually, everyone had some great thoughts, but a lot of it boils down to three things. It's like, how do we look after our clients? And that's, of course, really important because it pays our bill, but also we're contributing to the impact that they can have on society. And that's clearly really important for us. Also, how do we look after our people? And part of that is the sort of diversity focus that Jen's spoken about. But the third one that we're passionate about as well is what's the role that we have to play in our local community? And I look at that in a couple of ways. One is how we raise money for both national and local charities, because of course as a big organisation with access, to your point, of lots of young people who are willing to take on sporting challenges and so on. I'm doing the 10K at the ABP marathon in 2 weeks' time, but some of our younger colleagues are doing the full marathon, I think. So but we have the opportunity to do that, and we do lots on that front. We had 9 colleagues at Southampton City Farm yesterday redecorating their owl sanctuary to support that business. We currently have Alfie's Wish as our nominated charity for the next 2 years locally that, for example, we're doing the run for that I mentioned. And then today is Red Nose Day, hence why we've got these red noses here. But EY have been the honorary accountants of Comic Relief for the last 30 years. So I think all of that sort of what you might call CSR stuff is hugely important. But on top of that, what the feedback was that we were getting from our team was, how can we use the skills that we actually have as accountants to give back to society? I was going to say anyone can go to the farm and do that. That's not true. When I saw the people this morning of how tired they were today after spending a day at the farm, but what specific skills do we have that we can use? And one of the things that we're doing through the EY Foundation is something called Smart Futures. But how do we go into local schools, particularly underprivileged schools? So we typically look at schools that have over about 40% of their students eligible for free school meals. So how do we go and support some of those underprivileged pupils to give them the opportunities to access places like EY in the future? So we're going down to do an employability workshop in a few weeks' time at one of those schools. We'll then look to do more in the future. And actually the people that are coming to do that are really passionate about it, because they can see how the skills that they've learned in their first few years at EY can be then reflected upon those kids to sort of give them a future that maybe they were privileged enough to have. So that's something we're really passionate about.
That's all really good. I guess what we do like to do with these chats as well is just to get to know a little bit about you guys as individuals, as well as obviously the really good topics we've discussed. Obviously, you've come up different routes in terms of where you are. So I mean, maybe both of you could just talk a little bit about sort of how you've got to where you are in your career, if that's okay.
Should I start? So, I think I'll give myself injustice if I will say that it started 5.5 years ago when I joined EY. Because I know it goes way, way, way earlier than that. So just to give a brief background about myself, I grew up in a very small village in a rural town in the Philippines where there's no electricity, there's no transportation, and basically I need to walk more than an hour going to an area where I can catch transportation. At that early age, probably 5, 7 years old, I'm dreaming to be a person working in an office simply because there's an AC and they dress up nicely.
Sure.
So that is my dream as a small girl. And from then on, like a family of farmers, I strive day by day, month by month, year by year, finish grade school, high school, secured myself scholarship to enter university, passed the CPA board exam in the Philippines, and entered another Big Four way back in the Philippines. It's actually quite difficult when you're coming from a province and you are working as a 20 years old in a central business district of the Philippines and in a professional firm. But then I realized that I have a goal, and my 5-year-old self will probably be cheering that at least by then I'm working in an office and there's AC. And then from then on, it's 17 years ago, I strive again, day by day, month by month, year by year, attending facilitation trainings, attending conferences in the Asia Pacific region, going to the United States to be part of a secondment program for 2 years, and then eventually moving here in the UK. So that is my journey. From then on, as I'm looking back to a small farm with, up until now, doesn't have electricity.
Yeah.
I'm really proud of where I am, but it doesn't mean that this is where I stop.
Sure.
I'm always telling myself this is where I begin. And that's basically my journey.
No, it's really inspiring. And I think, again, there's a lot of common themes with the people we're speaking to, but I think it's interesting what you said there about this is not the end of your journey. You're still looking. And I think that sort of determination to progress, and as I said, it's very common with a lot of the people we speak to, and I don't think that ever stops really. And obviously you've done fantastically well. You're in a great position now, but it's not the end, as you said.
Thank you. Yes.
And Ryan?
It's an interesting sort of reflection, actually, because we all talk about our own stories, right? But they're all relative to other people, right? Which is where the sort of equity piece comes in. But yeah, I talked a bit about my sort of schooling before, through college, and then going to university. I went to Southampton University, close by to where I lived. That's great. Sort of a great business school there. And then I joined here as a graduate in 2004, which is a bit scary. Someone the other day said 2 decades, which just immediately made me feel so old. Yeah. I haven't thought about it in that way before. But yeah, sort of worked my way through the organisation, did a few different secondments and overseas rotations. So actually, I met my wife working in Australia. So she worked for EY in the US. We were both working in Adelaide in South Australia at the same time, got together. Then when you come home, we tried to do the long distance thing, but you never really know, how it will work. But luckily, I was then asked to go and work in Boston. So I was staying over in Cambridge near Harvard University for a couple of months. We saw each other every weekend, and then that kind of the rest was history, if you like. She sort of moved over here, and 3 kids later, we're still enjoying life. Well, most of the time it's got stressful, but most of the time it's good. So yeah, that's my sort of personal story. And I guess as I've moved up throughout the organisation, as well as taking on more interesting client work, trying to deliver value to them, I've also taken on a number of different roles within the business, both sort of locally in the office, but also nationally. And a lot of the stuff that I'm passionate about is around bringing through the next generation of talent. So as well as the things that we do within the local office, I have a role to interview all of our candidates that are trying to get to the director level nationally. I also help mentor and prepare a lot of people that are looking to go through the partner process, and sharing some of the experiences that I did as I went through the partner process 4 or 5 years ago as well. So that's some of a big part of the role that I'm really passionate about. We all do our sort of accounting and auditing work,
Sure.
but actually when you see people, whether it's Jhen that we work with really closely locally, or maybe someone that we've mentored from a different part of the business in the country, sort of make it through, it's so rewarding because you reflect back on the support that you receive when you're in that position, and you always say that you'll pay it forward. And when you can see some evidence of that, that's what sort of gets you out of bed in the morning.
And you both, one sort of topic that came up earlier in the conversation was empathy, and you both also mentioned that you've done secondments to different parts of the world when during your time. Do you think that that's been a really sort of important part of the journey, and would you recommend people doing that to understand working in different cultures, working with different people in different offices?
I mean, personally, I think that's one of the highlight of my career.
Yeah.
Because when I was seconded to United States during that time, I'm working in a diverse set of environment where there's representative from each member firms, and basically it's like a lot of countries representatives were there, and I'm the one from the Philippines. It creates that kind of opportunity not only to develop myself professionally, but more than that, it's actually the personal development. And I realized that as I develop more, I crave for more. And I realize as well that the more I know, the more I know that I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why I always strive to have something more than what I currently have.
One nice way to put it.
Yeah.
Kids.
Yeah, the same. I mean, it's probably one of the best sort of pieces of advice that I got when I first started is say yes as much as possible.
Sure.
You only really grow and develop when you're putting yourself slightly outside your comfort zone, right? And whether that's a secondment to another country or taking on a new client opportunity or taking on one of these roles internally that seems quite daunting in the first place, you always reflect back afterwards and think, I've now sort of moved my development along by having a slightly sort of challenging time for that. So I always kind of encourage our new graduates to say yes more than no, and normally those that do that sort of end up with a more fulfilling career, I would say.
But what's been the best piece of advice, either professionally or personally? And we've had all sorts. We've had some of some of the interviewees, it was their nan, some it was the first boss. So absolutely anything goes. What's the best piece of advice you've received, do you think?
I actually received one recently, but I realized as I was like looking back in terms of my career progression and where I've been up to, I'll go back to an old saying that I probably read somewhere when I was in uni, that says, if others can, why can't I? Which is something that I always like, whenever I'm having a lot of challenge, everything is difficult. I realize and I look for someone, wait, why am I able to do it?
Yeah.
Of course, I can also do it because he can. And that actually makes me like move far ahead, because there's nothing that is impossible as long as you put your head on it and work hard. So, I think that's for me.
Right.
Yeah. I get so much advice. I don't know what it says about what I'm doing all the time, but people often think, when you get to partner, you kind of know everything, because it's sort of, Jhen was talking about the other day in terms of, seeing some of the things that now she's within the leadership team that we struggle with and that we're trying our best to work through is actually quite sort of inspiring to her, to your point of sort of, if someone else can do it, I can do it. We were actually in a workshop the other day. We're currently doing something that's called embedding better behaviours, but all of the sort of partner group are going through it at the moment, which is all around linking back to the sort of diversity piece. But how do we live by our values? How do we sort of display the correct behaviours? If we want to be known in a certain way, how do we do those things on a day-to-day basis such that we kind of mirror how we would like to be known? And one of the things that someone said that really struck me was that we judge ourselves by our intent, but we judge others by the displayed behaviours.
Yep.
And that really kind of struck me, particularly as a partner where you're often put on a pedestal and you have people looking at you and hanging on all of your words, is that it doesn't sort of really matter what you think your intent was. It's about how it came across to the other person and the impact that you had on them, and it just really makes you stop and think about how you're saying things, what you're doing, and how you're hopefully sending someone away with a positive experience rather than a negative experience. So that was only last week, so I'm still learning.
Good. Well, guys, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. It's been really insightful to talk about diversity, work in the community, but also get to know you guys a bit more as well.